Alright, we are moving on with story time to the Book of Spells Grade 2, the second volume of Miranda Goshawk's Essential Guide to Spellcasting. Starting out in Chapter 1, Standard Book of Spells Grade 2 by Miranda Goshawk. Chapter 1, It Pays to Increase Your Spell Power. In the first volume of this series, readers were instructed on how to perform the most basic spells. Volume 2 demonstrates techniques enabling the advanced student to build and sustain magical power at the tip of the wand before it is released. This technique should facilitate the casting of far more powerful spells. To cast a spell, press and hold down the spell button. Keep the spell button held down until the spell power has built up, and then release it to cast the spell. Be careful not to hold the spell button down too long, as the spell may backfire on you. If you release the spell button at the right time, you will perform a perfect cast, the most powerful version of that spell. Students are encouraged to experiment with this technique, being very wary that lapses in concentration can result in painful side effects. Chapter 2, The Knockback Jinx. Knocks over an opponent or object. The incantation for the knockback jinx is Flipendo. This jinx is the most utilitarian of Grade 2 spells, in that it will allow the caster to knock back an opponent or object, and can also be used to push and activate certain magically charmed switches. Like many spells, Flipendo can be targeted using the L button. Lighting Your Wand. Chapter 3. Lights dark areas and reveals hidden panels. To illuminate the end of a wand, the caster must call out the incantation Lumos. The end of the wand will then illuminate and cast light in the immediate vicinity of the caster. Lumos can also be used to illuminate unseen entrances, and it is a little-known fact that certain shops in the gloomier parts of Diagon Alley may be further explored with Lumos. A further use of the spell is that it can be effective against anthropomorphic spirits in dark forested areas, but be warned, Lumos fades after a period of time and must be recast. Chapter 4, Severing Severely. Severs ropes and tapestries. As is the case with many Grade 2 spells, the Defendo Severing Charm has a variety of uses. For example, Defendo can be cast on certain tapestries or wall hangings to reveal heretofore hidden entrances. Students of herbology can also use Defendo to sever plant stems and roots. Chapter 5, Mastering Wizard Dueling. Reflect an opponent's spell back at them. The Expelliarmus dueling charm lies at the heart of a good dueling technique. Expelliarmus allows the duelist to rebound an opponent's spell in the hope that the rebounded spell will strike the opponent and leave him or her vulnerable to further attack. Chapter 6, Cleanliness equals wizardiness. Cleanliness equals wizardliness. Clears ectoplasm. Ectoplasm is a sticky green substance left behind by ghosts and has been known to make doorways impassable. There is a way of cleaning away ectoplasm without resorting to a can of Mrs. Scour's magic mess remover, and this is with an effective scouring charm such as Scourge. Chapter 7, Figuring Out Transfiguration. Transforms small objects into birds. Transfiguration is some of the most difficult magic to practice effectively. It is extremely difficult, for example, to transform something non-living into something that is alive. However, mastering a transfiguration spell such as Avifors, which will transform small inanimate objects into birds, can be both rewarding and useful. Chapter 8, Incendiary Magic. Burns certain items like webs. There is often a requirement for a spell of an incendiary nature. There is often a requirement for a spell of an incendiary nature, especially when confronted by a spider's web across a doorway or when a distraction is required. For both of the above, the Incendio charm can be used, otherwise known as the Bluebell Flames, or Cold Fire. Incendio may also be used as a dueling charm, although care must be taken if the opponent knows Expelliarmus. See Master Wizard Dueling above. And finally, Chapter 9, The Key to Unlocking. unlocked certain doors and chests. Mechanical, non-magical folk locks can be troublesome, but not if a witch or wizard knows the Alohomora locking charm. This charm, when cast on certain mechanically locked doors, will unlock them, giving access to the room or passage beyond. And thus concludes Book of Spells Grade 2. Moving on to our school records, there's not much to say here except our house points, which we have 10 house points and a grade of D for some reason, 40 rings and flying lessons and a grade of distinction, 52 seconds of Quidditch practice and a grade of distinction, and our Quidditch League and results stats. Moving on to Hogwarts A History, the definitive guide to Hogwarts Past by Chroniculus Punnet. Hogwarts A History by Chroniculus Punnet. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. The Chamber of Secrets. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets is the most enigmatic of all tales concerning the establishing of Hogwarts. When the four greatest witches and wizards of their age, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, came together to establish a school for those with magical abilities, it was logical that they chose a location far away from the eyes of non-magical people due to the climate of persecution prevalent at the time. Records show that the Hogwarts founders worked together for several years, seeking out youngsters who showed signs of magic and bringing them to the castle to be educated. However, a rift grew between Slytherin and the others when he criticized the number of students being admitted who came from non-magical families. Slytherin believed that magical learning should be kept within all magic families, and that students of non-magical parentage were untrustworthy. Eventually, a serious argument arose between Slytherin and Gryffindor regarding the subject, and such was the acrimony of the disagreement. Slytherin left the school for good. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets arises from Slytherin's departure and has been the subject of debate for many centuries. The legend itself concerns a chamber supposedly constructed by Slytherin deep beneath the school that he kept a secret from the other founders and sealed so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The story goes that when Slytherin's true heir returns, they alone will be able to open the Chamber of Secrets and release the horror within. A horror that will purge the school of those whom Slytherin believed were unworthy of studying magic. After many extensive searches of Hogwarts over the past 950 years, most reputable scholars agree that the existence of the Chamber of Secrets is a fanciful tale concocted by Slytherin supporters. While researching this book, the author consulted the newly appointed headmaster of Hogwarts, Professor Albus Dumbledore, who stated that during his time at the school he had personally seen nothing to convince him that the legend was based on anything other than supposition. And finally, moving on to Marauding with Monsters. Details of creatures you will meet and advise on defeating them. Marauding with Monsters by Gilderoy Lockhart. Animal, vegetable, horklump, or gnome? During my myriad travels across this magical globe of Oz, I have beheld many strange sights and encountered a veritable bestiary of peculiar and exotic creatures. The vast majority of creatures I have had the misfortune to encounter have been of a decidedly threatening variety. Not so the horklump, which is actually an animal rather than a plant. I well remember the time when, while staying with some fans of mine in the wilds of Essex, I offered to clear a pathway in their quaint suburban yard. I quail from terming the square of scrub and turf a garden, which had been ubiquitously blocked by several horklumps. The usual technique for uprooting horklumps is to take a good firm hold on them, then twist and yank them from the ground. Needless to say, when I had cleared the pathway of every last horklump, my fans were more than grateful and rewarded me with several bottles of their home-brewed celery and beetroot wine, which of course I promptly declined. Gnomes are rather more threatening than the inert and somewhat tedious horklump. These little pests are endemic to even the most well-tended garden. The most efficient way of dealing with this garden blight is to flipendo the little blighter, grab him by the legs, and fling him over a low wall or hedgerow. preferably not into your neighbor's smaller and less cared-for garden. One must be careful of the gnome's tiny yet razor-sharp teeth, but a well-targeted Flipendo knockback jinx will deal with them most assuredly. Of impish idiosyncrasies. I well remember the time when, on a particularly dangerous trek along the banks of the River Clyde in Glasgow, Scotland, in search of the fabled Weetamoris beastie, I chanced upon a snickering cluster of imps. Not to be confused with the pixie, these small, spiteful creatures often waylay the unwary traveler, pushing and tripping them in a most unpleasant manner. I myself, of course, am never unwary, and immediately upon spotting the snickering gang, I whipped out my trusty wand and cast a particularly well-aimed Flipendo knockback jinx at their cavorting leader. Before his gibbering cohorts could react, I then proceeded to grab the appended imp by its slimy ankles, being careful not to besmirch my lime-green robes, and threw it into the Clyde, where it floundered most satisfyingly before dragging itself onto the opposite bank and fleeing in the direction of the nearby sewage works. Thus were the imps defeated, the remaining band of jabbering pests running back to the filthy hole from whence they came. A frenzy of furious fire crabs. I well recall the time when on a peculiarly perspicacious journey into the heart of the Fijian rainforest, while engaged in a legendary odyssey to rescue the giant fire crab from extinction at the hands of unscrupulous wizard poachers, I had occasion to rest a while in the shade of a banyan tree. While performing certain urgent ablutions, I was attacked by a veritable horde of furious fire crabs. These dastardly crustaceans, obviously ignorant of the fact that I was endeavoring to save one of their kind from going way of the dodo. Gracefully, I managed to dance away from the fearsome blasts of flame roaring from their posteriors and immediately whipped out my trusty wand. With several deft and delightful casts of the knockback jinx, the fire crabs were all flipped onto their backs, their pathetic legs waving uselessly in the faded Fijian air. Leaving their exposed bellies to the burning rays of the scarring Fijian sun, I went jauntily on my way, with an avowed intent to join the unscrupulous wizard poachers and assist them in wiping out every last trace of these cruel and savage crustaceans. Dire dog spirits. The black, vampire-infested forest of central Romania is not so bleak and forbidding a place than the twisted heart of the New Forest in Hampshire, England. It was here, several winters ago, that I chanced upon two of the most dreadful creatures known to wizards and witches. I well remember the hour, late in the day, as I wandered gaily through the blighted woodland in search of the infamous wild ponies of that area. I entered a leafy glade, only to be confronted by a pair of prowling gytrashes. These large dog spirits barred my way, and so, whipping up my trusty wand, I cast Lumos to illuminate its tip, whereupon the gytrashes retreated from the light, and I was free to pass through the forest unmolested. Whew! That concludes that book. So now let's go ahead and read through these hint books right here. Starting with this one. Hint. Throwing gnomes can, and perhaps should, evolve into a fascinating and rewarding pastime. There really is nothing like the feeling one gets when clobbering one of these ugly pests with a well-aimed knockback jinx, and then flinging it over a low wall, or from a high wall, or into the depths of a river or a lake, or over waterfalls, or maybe into a swamp. At Hogwarts, beating the gnome-flinging records will result in the reward of a famous Witches and Wizards card, which is always very gratifying. Over here, we have this book. Well, okay. Maybe it's over here, actually. Okay, you know what? Let's just start right here, actually. It's not going to be a complete paragraph, but anyways. And there are numerous ways in which to use the Incendio charm. One of these involves casting the charm on certain kinds of brazier in order to light them. If all Incendio braziers in a specific location are lit at the same time, a famous Witches and Wizards card can be gained. This neat little trick is especially beneficial to collectors of these fine cards. The Incendio charm has also been utilized to rather more nefarious gain. For example, young wizards and witches have been known to set fire to the trousers of a smaller child to extort sweets or contraband from them. Unless the unfortunate victim knows an extinguishing charm, they may run around for days with the seat of their pants in flames. Okay, I'm going to go back here to see if there's another page in a book over here. Not only on a broomstick, but mounted on the back of a hippogriff. These kinds of races are very different to the competitions found at Hogwarts. A race around the castle grounds against another student may result in the winner gaining a famous Witches and Wizards card. The use of a Vitamix potion is strictly against the rules, however, and not only due to the fact that this is unsportsmanlike behavior, the Vitamix potion may have unfortunate side effects on certain people. It's a good thing we didn't use that. Otherwise, we'd have been in trouble in our racing. Okay, so this last hint book says, more so the great lake located in the grounds of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The gnomes infesting the banks of the lake should be thrown bodily into the waters, this act often producing multiple benefits for collectors of the famous Witches and Wizards cards. Throwing gnomes can, and perhaps should, evolve into a fascinating and rewarding pastime. And we've already read this. Sorry, I had to cut that short. We already read that page there. So, this pretty much concludes story time. And yeah, these are the maps for Aragog's lair and the Forbidden Forest. I'll just show you guys what these maps look like in case I haven't already. Here's all the way back at Diagon Alley, which we were there a long time ago, and the Burrow. And so, this pretty much concludes story time. So, after I hit these glasses, we're gonna head on back down to the entrance hall for the end of the game. I hope you all had a wonderful time listening to story time here. I apologize if I made any mistakes while reading. This was kind of like sight reading. We have not seen these books in a long time, and I haven't either. So it was kind of like a sight reading job for me. Alright, so we're going to stop right here, and then in the next part, we will finally see the end of this game. Until then, this is Shifty3 Plays, saying, we'll see you down at the entrance hall, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for listening and watching. Bye-bye.